So we're back talking about Chia. I think it's always great to check in with the community with what's happening in this particular ecosystem. I know one of the big things that has recently occurred is that the whole carbon market has started becoming effectuated here. And I think the thing that's interesting to note with respect to what's going on in the carbon market is this is the voluntary carbon market, and it's a distinction between what was required in the Paris Accord versus what individuals might do with respect to their own carbon footprint. So, Lucas, I know you've looked into this quite a bit. Have you caught up with what was going on in the carbon market and how all of this retirement works? Like, this is real world assets for real on Chia, and so I think it's pretty interesting to see this go live and actually be happening. I think this is all happening with EcoRegistry.
Yeah, so the carbon markets are just, to me, one of the most fascinating things happening in money in the world, in blockchain. And but it is interesting to note that while we do have carbon credits that are available for trade on Chia, it's a voluntary carbon market. And the idea and some of the structure that's been laid out for it was done through the Kyoto Protocol and then later the Paris Accords, the Paris Agreements. And that Paris Accord and framework is done under the United Nations. And if you're not familiar,
Well, wait. So the Kyoto, so there's a difference. The Kyoto Protocol versus the Paris versus voluntary. It was my understanding that this whole voluntary carbon market was for, I don't know, individuals who wanted to offset their personal carbon footprint. So, like, if I was feeling like I wanted to help the planet and I was going to take a trip to Europe and that was going to dump 10,000 tons of carbon into the air because I was on that airline, plane, whatever, and I wanted to offset my carbon, that I could go and purchase these carbon offsets and then feel better about the planet. And maybe Taylor Swift needs to go do this too. Who knows? But is that what I'm following along with, or is there something else with Kyoto that we need to look at?
well, so if Taylor Swift is going to buy her offset, she's going to have to buy a couple more than you. But I think she
I
might.
mean, I think she should be, right. I mean, I think she cares about the planet. So why isn't she buying carbon offsets? Like, she's dumping carbon into the air. So get with it.
Well,
Chop
she may.
chop. Let's go.
Yeah, she may very well be, actually. I wouldn't be surprised if she was. Well, so the Kyoto Protocol, I'm
Well,
not
wait a
sure.
minute. I think you're giving her too much credit, man. I haven't heard fun about it. Has she actually bought some carbon credits? I'm gonna see if I can do a little sleuthing on this.
I
I've heard nothing to this effect.
I bet she has bought carbon credits to offset her jet travel just so that she can. Well, I think there's a lot of people who, if they can afford it, or are very interested in in addressing their carbon use or their energy consumption. And the carbon markets. So you asked earlier what the relation between Kyoto Protocol and Paris Accords is. Well, the Kyoto Protocol was, and I didn't look all this history up, but just going off of what I remember, the Kyoto Protocol was somewhere around, I don't know, 2005, 2006. And it was a conference that was held by several countries in the world that were looking at growing energy consumption, and probably had a better understanding of the denomination of world trade being in the dollar, and an understanding of what kind of problems that came to with with a I guess they understood the trap of inflating the dollar, and that was part of the problem in the world. I mean, when we think about like rising energy consumption, part of it had to do with like pegging pegging progress and world trade to something that's can be constantly inflated, like the dollar was a problem. And so the answer was, well, we should be looking at carbon. And so the Kyoto Protocol was a pledge by various countries to begin to create carbon markets or to limit their carbon usage. And later in, gosh, like 2010, the Paris Accords were signed, and they were looking in the future and saying, well, by 2015, we will have a carbon trade program, a and a carbon market. That got pushed back then to 2020, and now has been pushed back even further. So so I guess what it did was lay the groundwork and an understanding for a world of energy trade. I've also mentioned in the past how I thought blockchain was very interesting with regard, or the growth of Bitcoin in the wake of the collapse of Enron, and how we don't associate those together enough. Like, Enron was in some ways a financial scam, but some of the ideas behind Enron, about trading the cost of energy and trading energy production, are very interesting, and were and like had a lot of foresight as to something different than gold or silver in backing a currency.
Well, to answer the question that we posed earlier, is Taylor Swift buying carbon? Looks like there's evidence that she's doing that. I don't know if she's doing it for her personal use. I couldn't find anything about that, but the Eras tour apparently had done some. And this carbon market that we're talking about, the voluntary one, I think it's mostly being done by EcoRegistry. So EcoRegistry is the one who's participating in the Climate Action Datatrust. They have loaded up some of their projects into CAD Trust and then tokenized them on Chia. And then this is what's being retired here. So you can see it's in partnership with EcoRegistry, and there's a specific climate wallet that you can use on Chia. So you can send tokens, retire your carbon assets, and detokenize your assets. I'm not sure exactly what that last part is, but this part is pretty cool. Like, that's a real world use case here. So we're talking about something very real, very substantive that's happening on Chia, and happening between a decentralized market, a decentralized protocol, kind of everything that the whole blockchain world has said that they want is now happening. So this is pretty neat, I think.
I saw that EcoRegistry, their location that they have on their Twitter page is in Colombia. Do you know if they're based in Colombia?
I don't know much about EcoRegistry beyond the fact that this is what's happening here. But let me see if I can get that question answered. Since we were talking about the Kyoto Protocol, I figured we could probably throw this on the screen. Here's a little bit that I found about it. So,
well, and I guess the reason that I asked too is because I don't know if you remember some of the political positioning in the past.
Didn't they call it cap and trade before too? I remember
They
that.
did. They called it, yeah, and that came out of, I believe, the eurozone, a European Union concept there with the cap and trade, and I think that goes back to like 1995. But I didn't dig that deeply into it. But part of this understanding too of a world carbon trade system also goes back to sort of political positioning that was done in South America, and think back before BRICS of 2008 and all of this interest in countries in South America, and on one hand you had sort of the Greenpeace people who were saying, oh, you can't sell the rainforest that provides the oxygen for the world. And they were saying this to the likes of Ecuador and Peru and Colombia and all these countries in South America, and those countries' response was, well, are you gonna pay us to leave it as rainforest? Because because why does the rest of the world get to quote unquote get ahead for 50 or 60 years in joining the world economic system, and yet we have to cap our population and cap our economic growth in order to maintain a rainforest that is providing oxygen and absorbing carbon for the rest of the world. And so that began to be incorporated into this notion of a world carbon market. And so you could have countries and private citizens, private corporations that are going out and preserving rainforest or um, creating carbon capture methods. There's sort of a couple of different ideas as to how that happens, but in essence, like saving the rainforest instead of using the rainforest, or burning the rainforest and turning it into farms, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's sort of the background into where this idea of a carbon market comes from.
And to answer the question, I sleuthed this out a bit, went to the EcoRegistry. Uh, Anecdotally, contacto, I think that's Spanish. That's how you say contact. The plus 57 on the phone number, that's a Colombian prefix. So, yep, I think it's pretty well confirmed that this is Colombia, and it defaults to Colombia as far as the country. So, yep, I think it is based out of Colombia, but it looks like they have worldwide reach. So I think it just so happens that these guys are based out of Colombia, but I don't think that their purview is limited to only projects in Colombia. So I think that they are pretty much an international player, but they are based there.
Well, that's interesting also because of I don't know, the United States history with Colombia, with concerns about because part of the problem that we have in world commerce too is in some countries like Colombia, some of the we've got plenty of wheat coming from the likes of the United States and Ukraine and Egypt and other staples. So after a while, it's like, well, if you're going to cut down the forest, you want to grow something that pays a lot of money. And Colombia is where drugs come from, or some drugs come from. So you could see the United States also being interested in supporting carbon capture methods or preserving the rainforest in Colombia. So
Yeah, and this partnership between CAD-T and the dashboard and EcoRegistry, and this really kicked off in earnest last year. So this was a tweet that happened back then. And we do have some news on the Climate Action Datatrust front as well. So they are, in the parlance of the world of blockchain, they're moving into, I think, what's called a community takeover. They're moving towards a permanent governance model. And I don't know if they're doing anything interesting on the blockchain front. It doesn't seem so. They're not using a DAO or anything like that, but they are transitioning their governance to some sort of a team. There's a new person who is taking over here. So yeah, there's some kind of a governance change that's happening with the Climate Action Datatrust to facilitate this worldwide carbon market. So if we're at the early phase of this with the voluntary side of things, I think you were telling me that the mandatory part is kicking in, what, next year, or is it in 2030?
well, it seems that the mandatory part was supposed to kick in 2020 and has been moved back and moved back and moved back. And I think that's where we get into maybe some concerns about what the power is of the UN and what the power is of uh, or what our expectation is for countries to engage in a voluntary system whenever limiting the economic production of a country is how do we begin to provide value to that? So it is through the UN, through Article 6 Section 4 or Article 6 Paragraph 4, but that market is not in place yet. And so I think it's fascinating. I mean, we can think about alternative routes that market might or that it might be achieved through, and we might see more and more countries that are involved, or more corporations that are involved in the voluntary carbon market. Think of, I mean, 10 years ago, you would not have seen companies in the United States or international corporations engaging in concepts of ESG, but but they do so now, and that might be an argument as to how beneficial that is for them. Um, we may see more corporations that are in, or more global players that are engaging in the voluntary carbon market. But I also think that we will see the carbon market enshrined in the IMF and the World Bank system. And we've talked a little bit about that, but essentially, loans are given to many countries throughout the world by the World Bank, and or by the IMF, and they are done according to money that gets put in by various other nations in the World Bank, and they do so to secure markets for world trade.
Is that the special drawing rights? Is that what that is? Is that what you're referring to with the?
Yes. Well, the special drawing rights are accorded according to what the, how much a country has invested into the World Bank. And so if you put, so many $billion into the World Bank, that's a percentage of how many dollars are placed into the World Bank, and then that gives different countries a reward, a percentage of the rewards for, but either the market or the loan repayments of the countries that take IMF loans.
So I know that some of the criticism around all of this stuff is it seems like this is another mechanism to surreptitiously tax people, that this is not real, that all of this carbon market stuff is just a very convoluted way to transfer money from certain individuals to certain other individuals that play the game right. Do you have any opinion on all of that? Do you think all this carbon trading thing is where we're actually headed? I mean, this is just on a personal level. I don't know, like you're not like deeply involved in all of this stuff, right? Or do you have a passion for this?
I have a passion for this, and I think this.
That's tongue in cheek. You do not. Do you really?
Absolutely, I do.
How much? Well, are you sitting on a mountain of carbon? Are you a carbon speculator? Or like I mean, like I'm not trying to say that you're like giving financial advice, but like, are you buying up cheap carbon in anticipation of it going up?
Well, no, but I was raised on a farm, and the farm has been in my. I was raised on a farm that has been in the family for generations.
Well, because
And
your
we,
methane tax is going to come up pretty soon, man. Like the methane's the worst offender than carbon. And that's actually we should actually bring that up because I know that there's been a narrative about Bitcoin lately because Bitcoin has been showing carbon negativity because methane has, I don't know, something like 70 or 100 times the effect on greenhouse versus carbon. And so if you burn the methane and turn it into carbon dioxide, it's actually better than if you just let that methane get up into the upper atmosphere. So any of these places where they're venting off the natural gas as a result of fracking and whatever else they're doing, you actually get a net negative carbon. So there's been this push to say that putting Bitcoin miners on top of these vents of methane is actually carbon negative, and that you could say that there's actually a positive impact in the world for having all these ASICs out there. It's like pretty convoluted. I'm not sure I fully understand the math on that, but there's definitely a narrative going on there.
well, and I think that that yes, that's an interesting aside. Capturing methane, and and using it. It's so part of the thing we should ask ourselves is why aren't we already doing some of those things already? why are we not recycling in the United States? Why are we not because that's a true like truly like more conservative method. Why do we build homes in cities and then like cart them across the nation on the backs of trucks, et cetera, et cetera. And if you begin to look into our history and say like look at when we started using building materials and prefabbed homes, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it comes from this ability to inflate the money supply, and so many things that don't seem to make sense in the world today come from a reliance on a narrative of infinite money and uh, that bankers have or I don't know that a lot of people have wanted to see and I don't know this is a grant this is a great detour, but I think you asked it, why do I have a passion about this? I grew up on a farm. I was in I was a teenager whenever some of these concepts were coming out. Farmers were very concerned about them in the United States, and um, we could see some of these policies taking hold in Europe and the cap and trade program in Europe. Europe farmers were very concerned about what that was going to mean here. But when I began to dig like into the I don't know the greater economic history of the United States, a bushel of wheat today you get paid $4 for that bushel of wheat. And in 1945, I just looked it up, you got $1.50 for that bushel of wheat. And we've seen we've seen a loss of small farms throughout the United States, and so I've also talked about the velocity of money and how when we live in a
Okay,
system.
wait. So you gave us some background. You grew up on a farm, bushel of wheat. Tie it together though. I'm not getting it. Like, how does this help our farmers? Like, it would seem to me that we've seen some reports in England particularly, which has some of the most bizarre farming laws, and mostly I've been getting schooled on this stuff because I like the show Clarkson's Farm. You ever watch that?
No, never heard of it.
Jeremy Clarkson was this race car driver, and he decided at one point when he lost his farm manager, whatever, he bought this farm in England, and he lost his farm manager, and he's like, I'm gonna farm it myself, and he decided to make a TV show out of it, and it's fascinating because half of the show is him fumbling around and not being a very effective farmer. But the other half is him working with his, I don't know, advisor, manager, or whatever. And he'll come to him with these proposals or with like what they're planning on doing. And then he'll start listing off all the rules and regulations and how they get money and how the farm makes money and whether you get money for planting a certain crop or leaving certain thing fallow, and like they run afoul of city council laws and just this plethora of different things that come up. And so it's fascinating from like a person who's interested in seeing a fairly entertaining show, but also to get a peek into what does it look like in the rules and regs and one of the oldest country empires that exist on this planet. And I'm just gobsmacked by the amount of stuff that they have to deal with and consider, and the amount of money that they potentially lose on just being involved in putting a crop in the ground. It's pretty shocking. And so when I think about this whole carbon market, and you think about, well, cows exhaust methane through their excretions and whatever, and then you start thinking about, well, you're spraying different chemicals on here, you're putting fertilizers on there, and you start thinking about the emissions of the planet and what does it actually come down to me it seems like this is going to fall squarely on the shoulders of agriculture, because if I'm recalling this correctly, when people have added up the total impact on carbon, they keep pointing the finger at livestock and dairy and whatever. And this is why people have said, in the future, you're going to eat crickets and bugs because they're going to come after the farmers with this stuff. So I'm surprised to hear that you're excited about this being a farmer when it seems to me a lot of the farmers are pretty apprehensive about this stuff.
Well, not all farmers are the same, and the world that we live in now is not one of small farms. I want to see small farms and small producers, but part of the problem is that we've lived in a world that focuses on supply to keep to keep things cheap for consumers all around the world, and 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 moving away from that idea of focusing on like increasing supply to make things cheap for the rest of the world, focusing on efficiency, that's a system of large corporations, and that's a system that we've seen grow and grow and grow over time. So
Yeah, and it's largely those large farms that have started to take over. I think the only counterpoint to that is where you have these organic, smaller producers that have crewed up into co-ops or CSAs and what have you that are still out there. But that, yeah, they're definitely in the decline. This idea that small farms are mostly the backbone of America, that's long gone since what, at least the 70s, probably, right?
and it started to go away in the 40s, and the 40s is whenever we
Is that with the whole Grapes of Wrath thing where they marched the Okies into California or whatever?
yeah, well, and that's, I mean, that's part of the understanding. So and it's important to go back and look at what happened then. So first of all, let's start at like, what is the narrative today? Well, the narrative is one of concern for food scarcity. You get a lot of these like small producers, and they talk about, oh, the end of the world, I'm going to grow my own, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that go back to the 1940s, and when we had a or the late 30s, and when we had the Great Depression, it was not people were starving or standing in bread lines, not because there was a lack of food, a, a lack of meat, of wheat, of everything else. It was because there was massive disparity in who had money and who did not have money. And so in the early 40s, before we came up with the concepts of managing what was produced and reducing supply through crop insurance, some of the immediate responses to the Great Depression was to go out and burn fields of wheat and slaughter herds of sheep and cattle, so that you would reduce the supply and that the price would go up, and there could be a higher price for grain. And
But that was really only happening in the United States, right? That wasn't a worldwide phenomenon, was it?
no, it happened all over the world. And
Really?
even, yeah, absolutely. Even those places that, I mean, like, think about famine in Africa, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, it may come a little bit on the heels of a drought, but it's more so due to political inequality, and that some people have access to wealth and other people don't. And so on the heels of the Great Depression, like those people who in charge at the USDA and in charge of food policy in the United States, and the creators of the world economic system, the dollar exchange system that we have today, they understood that. And that's why when I say the IMF and the World Bank, the quid pro quo for engaging in that market is securing markets. The United States took a page from that book back in the 40s, and they said, "Oh, we have all of these things, we have all of this stuff that we have produced, and we need people to sell it to." So it wasn't securing markets because we were concerned about not making enough food in America. It was securing markets so that we could find people to sell things to.
So as a farmer, and speaking in from the perspective of farmers, carbon trading helps you how?
Well, the narratives that many farmers believe today is not the narrative that I just put out to you. Like we get told today, oh, the reason that the reason that and I brought up like wheat is $4 a bushel today, and was $1.50 a bushel in 1945 to lay out to you that no farmer, no family can afford to live on that. Like, what is the inflation of the cost of living, the price of goods, and everything else today? That means that only large corporations can afford farms, and a lot of those large corporations are held up by bailouts from the government.
Crop subsidies.
Yeah, crop subsidies and things that it takes a large group of people getting together to collude with the government or with other governments, or to borrow a lot of debt and then restructure and go bankrupt and change the name on the company, while the CEOs and the executives are given golden parachutes, and the workers are left holding nothing. And meanwhile, they're getting money that's sort of off the books with regards to what the cost of bread and milk and everything else is. Yeah, the farm bills are wonderful. They have been massive payouts to the four large corporations that now own all of the land and
Well, and I don't think we really have the debate on the farm bill anymore. I remember when I was younger that this was like one of the big annual fights, but it looks like ever since 2018 we've just been doing a continuing resolution or whatever, and we don't really update this thing. So, all of the criticisms that Kennedy has leveled against what's going on in America, it, in a large part, stems from the capture of certain agencies. And I'd say that the Farm Bill is probably a big part of this, because it's subsidizing the production of certain types of foodstuffs, and those foodstuffs are then what make it into our food. And so if you're saying, why is it that everything is made from corn and seed oils, it's like, well, because that's what we pay the farmers to produce. And if they're not producing something that comes with a subsidy, then it better have a pretty strong market for it. So either you're micro small producing stuff that is sold at farmers markets and directly to consumers through things like CSA, or you're this big agribusiness that's engaging in these factory farms and large scale crop production. And then it's all about gaming what you can get out of the Farm Bill. And that is definitely echoed in what happens in the UK too. It's like they pass these really weird bills that subsidize certain types of things and mandate and restrict things that you can do. And so this is very much like a government activity at this point in America and other places in the industrialized world, is that you don't have this sort of freewheeling, we're just going to put a crop in the ground. Like, you have to really look hard at what these bills say and where you can get paid and how crop insurance works. It all ties in with this whole idea of carbon trading. So, as much as we may celebrate that real world assets are being traded on a blockchain, there's consequences to the entire world of the fact that this is being done. And I'm not sure I 100% agree with you that this is good for farmers. I feel like this is probably going to result in negative things happening for farmers. I'm skeptical. I'm dubious. I'm nervous about this whole thing personally.
Well, but again, which farmers are we talking about? Because
Well, I only care about one kind of farmer, and that's the farmer that produces like real food. Like this, we're producing corn to make ethanol out of, or corn to make feedlots. That's not as interesting. And if you're spraying glyphosate all over your crop to kill weeds and this kind of stuff, like we gotta. This is the kind of thing that we have to stop doing. Like this can't be good for the environment. It can't be good for our health.
Well, this is the carbon market, or I should say more broadly, like, when I say that, like, this expectation of supply has been the trap of small farmers, it's because it abuses the lack of knowledge that a farmer has about the rest of the world, or that everybody else does. And so, what is going to be good about the carbon system, and for including in an evaluation, like, what the worth is of land that is maybe not conducive to farming, is you're not going to farmers who have good land that should be that is ideal for the constant, like, generation of crops, are not going to be undercut by somebody who can come in and burn some forest with very small amount of topsoil and beat their price for, say, raising soybeans for the next 2 years. And that's been the system that has undercut the prices of farmers who had good arable land, and led them to sell out to the bankers, and bankers who were making money or had like diversified incomes and could make money either through the processing of those foods, or through other financial instruments, or standing next to government and getting bailouts there. And so what we've needed was an ability to assess like what the value is land everywhere, and to have a system in which we move things over into the open market. One thing that because I hear a lot of negative things about the carbon market, but at least I guess I should say I hear some like claims of socialism. Well, if the difference between if your difference between capitalism and socialism is that one has a limited amount of resources and one has an unlimited amount of resources, the world is round. And there is a limited amount of resources that we have, especially when it comes to farming, because it comes at a rate. Harvests have to wait for a certain amount of time for grain to grow, for cattle to eat and have be large enough to eat, to have children, for chicken to lay eggs, et cetera, et cetera. And so part of this narrative of unlimited resources has been incredibly disastrous for small farms. And we've needed a way to assess that. And so part of the solution is, because I don't make a distinction between quote unquote socialism and capitalism as being unlimited and limited. I say, how close do they stand to government? And if what government can do is hold secrets and keep secrets, then having an open market is absolutely crucial for us to go forward with a system that's more fair, especially to small farmers. And that is what, especially why Chia is so very interesting, and why having uh, uh, an open blockchain and an open market for carbon credits is going to be transformational in world economies.
Maybe to round that out, just taking a quick look at how this works or how this looks. So you've got these decentralized markets like Dexy, which a little bit of a misnomer on decentralized. Yes, it's decentralized in the sense that you're not intermediated by Dexy because of the way offer files work. And we probably don't highlight that enough, but this whole thing that's going on Chia is peer-to-peer. So like even this thing that we're looking at where Acevale posted this, the famous developer of Mint Garden, where what he's doing is he's buying some carbon tokens that are registered here. So this is this smallholder reforestation project from EcoRegistry. I'm reading that off because it might be a little small to see it on screen. And it's kind of neat because they've even got the linkages where you can go see it in CAD Trust. So Dexy's done some really cool work to really make this as easy to read as possible. So they've parsed this token, which is 10 of these eco tokens, 10 of these eco 2021 tokens, and he's buying it for $65. So this is a peer-to-peer exchange where whoever was holding this 10 tokens is selling it to Acevale. They're going to do this via an offer file, and then what Acevale can then do is take it into his Chia wallet and retire the carbon. And so this is this whole idea of finding these carbon assets and looking at the registry, the location, the project name, the vintage, and what have you, locating this on Dexy and then retiring it. So this whole idea that you can do all of this stuff in Chia and on the open carbon market is pretty powerful, pretty cool. And ultimately it's intended to participate in this voluntary carbon market. So I think we did a pretty good job of recapping that and kind of bringing that together. I don't know if we wanted to move on at all.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on, because we could go on forever about the about economics and world trade. So long story short, voluntary carbon market growing. The compulsory carbon market is not ready yet, but this really opens the door for, I think, a more ideal, as we are pretty libertarian here and we want to give people choices. It's wonderful that we've built an option and that we have different tools for a new world going forward, than reliance on governments and their secrets. Yeah, we also had, I don't know, and if you want to dwell on that, but I thought we were going to talk about DataLayer also today too, and
Yeah. Let's move to DataLayer and decentralized internet. So we've covered this before. We've talked to Michael Taylor directly. Then we had a follow-up show on DataLayer. So this is really checking in on where the progress of this is at. So Michael has been busy building this, and he essentially made this fairly easy to use. So this is an update post that happened recently, like within this week, where he said, "Hey, I did this thing. I published 2 gigs, 20,000 files, and it's there. DataLayer now scales." So this idea that you can build a decentralized internet, or that a decentralized internet is now upon us, is pretty exciting. And this is, again, built on top of Chia. So Chia is doing something that I think a lot of blockchains have aspired to do, that they thought would be possible. And it's being powered by a blockchain that has programmability that really enables this kind of stuff. So while some of these concepts and ideas may be possible on other chains, it's been effectuated on Chia, and it's here. And now they've got another collection of this NFT that has been published, where the metadata and the pixel data is contained on DataLayer. So you have pointers to this stuff from the Chia blockchain, and then now, as long as you have this market that is enabled by the DataLayer, facilitation mechanisms, you now have a fully decentralized internet with a mechanism for how to incentivize people to replicate and make sure that the data stays persistent and available, unlike IPFS, which has, I think, notoriously been suffering under this. It's like we just saw IPFS storage say this isn't free anymore. We can't keep subsidizing all of this. I think Filecoin is kind of tanking in its price and is having trouble finding its foot. And so this idea that you could use this mechanism of the new scalable data layer and do something real with it, they've proved this out. So this is now well in hand. I think that this marketplace is still to be developed. There's probably still work on the Oracle. I haven't heard much on that, but as far as this thing being functional, I think it's there. If you wanted to have decentralized storage, it's not storing it directly in the blockchain, but adjacent to it through all the mechanisms that have been talked about before and previously. But yeah, here it is. So pretty exciting to see this come to fruition, and that there actually is a NFT collection that's using the latest and greatest of the data layer technology.
We did a couple of episodes on the both the data layer and decentralized internet. It's in the wake of that too. I was thinking how interesting it is to solve, say, routing issues of a decentralized internet through a blockchain. And whenever we talk about the data layer being adjacent to, it's decentralized storage using Chia for routing or for finding that information. But when Michael, in that tweet, he talks about being able to compress into a Merkle tree. What was it, 2 gigs, or I forget how large. Can you break down for me what's going on there? What was difficult about compression in making that storage more scalable?
It's some of the details around how the original conceptualization of how data layer was supposed to work. So it had this concept that you would store the actual data in the SQLite database. So data layer as it was originally envisioned was a way to put a database next to the Chia database. So blockchains are all databases fundamentally. They're very special types of databases that are brokered by their consensus mechanism as to who can write to the database. And all blockchains fundamentally store their data in a database. Because of the limitations of that database, it makes it hard to conceive of doing certain types of things like CAD trust. And so DataLayer was invented to say, well, could we have another database and have the consistency and the knowledge of what that database's state is supposed to be stored in the blockchain. So using the blockchain as sort of this distributed trust server, which harkens to everything we talked about in software, like this idea that you have a decentralized trust mechanism, and that's fundamentally what you can use blockchains for. That applies to Bitcoin and applies equally to Chia. So essentially what you're doing is you're saying, if you want to know that you have the right data, go look at the blockchain. That will tell you what the right data is. So you take a Merkle hash of that database, and then you put that hash on chain. And so when you get a copy of the database, you can compute if somebody has errantly messed with this thing. And so it's fundamentally a cybersecurity mechanism to say the way that you know you have the right data and that somebody hasn't tampered with it, to provide for that, that genuine article that you have the correct thing. You use the blockchain and its immutable nature to facilitate that. So you've got this hash that you put out there, so you know that you get the right thing. In the original concept of DataLayer, they were putting all of the data into that SQLite database, and that made it really onerous to move large amounts of data around. So you see he's talking about 2 gigs of data. Essentially, they'd have to take that 2 gigs of data, chunk it into 25 megabyte files. Then you would take those 25 megabyte files, dump them into a SQLite database, which is not suited to storing binary data like that. So he made a lot of changes to how DataLayer works by saying, instead of putting the data into this other database that's adjacent to the blockchain database, put it on the file system, put pointers to the data into the database, and then remove a bunch of the restrictions on how this stuff is working and make it all faster. And he told us that when he was doing all the design for this, it actually ended up being very similar to a different type of tool that programmers use all the time, which is a distributed version control system. So kind of what DataLayer is it's a form of a version control system, and you use the blockchain to say, this is the version you should have, and the way that you're going to know the version is through its hash. And so the compression part, I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about here. I think he's maybe talking about compressing the actual pixel data. And so that may be a way that he's saying, I've achieved, if I were to store the pixel data in a certain way, it would be 2 gigs, but it was able to compress because, I don't know, a lot of the pixel data is all yellow or something, and so therefore it compresses down or something. And we probably have to ask Michael exactly what he means about the compression, but that's what it means about this Merkle roots and the rest of this stuff, is just that he's made design changes in the way that DataLayer works so that it facilitates storing large amounts of data like this much easier than what was conceived of for CAD Trust, and has made it so that it works better. So who knows, maybe CAD Trust will switch over to using Michael Taylor's version of this, because I think they actually had said that they had an upgrade path that was pretty simple for anybody that was using the old version to upgrade to this.
Interesting. And I saw you brought up a tweet by FizzPoiz with the CAD Trust. Was he addressing some of that?
I think he's just crowing, just generally being excited that this is happening, and that Michael's progress is pushing towards a world where we can use these types of mechanisms instead of using more centralized storages like AWS. And the issue with using things like AWS is, if you run afoul of AWS's policies regarding what you can put in their servers, then they can rug you. They can take your account away. They can take that data down, and then you're at their mercy. But if you're using a decentralized mechanism like this, where you're paying people to replicate your data, and that data is being replicated in jurisdictions where those types of content restrictions wouldn't come into play, then you can be unstoppable. And that's a pretty powerful message. And so I think what FizPoWiz is saying here is that it's exciting to see this get that easy. And it wasn't that easy in the past. And it certainly wasn't that easy with the first incarnation of DataLayer on Chia, as it was used by CAD Trust when you were trying to do things that are big files. You have any kind of a thing where this is the type of data we want to store in this day and age. Like if you wanted to do the publishing of what WikiLeaks did back in the day, that would be facilitated here. So instead of relying on something like WikiLeaks to exist, you could publish it to something like this. And now that sensitive data that some people would find distasteful or that they wouldn't want on the internet could now be on the internet in a way that would be only stoppable if you can get all the people who are mirroring the data to stop mirroring the data.
I propose the name ChikiLeaks, Chiapedia. Yes, when WikiLeaks, when Wikipedia. I know I saw Drac was also working with Michael and might be putting some of his collections on over. It'll be interesting to see who else moves over, even the likes of Rumble someday. So incredible stuff. Very excited to see Michael solve some of these issues and get the data layer up and going, or it's already been up and going, but to smooth the process so much. Anything else on the data layer that has you excited?
Well, I thought I'd bring up the thing you're referencing because I did see it when he posted about that. So yeah, another dev in the community that's been famously working on Tanging and Tang Talk and whatever, that working with Michael Taylor. I also thought I recalled seeing that something on Dig and DataLayer and Evergreen was happening, but then when I went to try to find that, I wasn't able to track that tweet down. So I don't know if you kept track of that post, but I remember there being something said to that effect. So I don't know if that got leaked too early and they weren't ready to announce that, and they said, "Hey, wait, take that down." But I didn't see it when it came across originally.
I did see it too. I'm not going to go searching for it, but I did see it. Maybe they did take it down. Maybe it was in somebody else's account. Yeah, I wonder, like, I wonder if some of the back end of Drax sort of Tang Talk Wireless is also going to function on DataLayer. I don't know that much about it, but more decentralized solutions, I think, is the short story here. There's also, I saw it was either Steve or maybe it was Dusty that no, it was Michael Hintz, and Michael Hintz with Saul's Lot tweeted that he fully supports the new compression. So new compression is coming out, the new plot compression. Have you followed that? I'm sure you have.
I mean, to the extent that we've talked about this directly with Bram Cohen, yeah, we covered it, I think, pretty well. I don't know that there's much to say beyond what already got said. I mean,
well, I would say, I thought, I mean, when we talked to Bram, it wasn't, the release of it was not set, but I thought I saw that the release is coming in like 5 days now.
Well, okay, like if you saw that and I can throw it on the screen, I must have missed that one. I did not hear that the plot format was done and that it was being released in 5 days. So that's news to me.
Well, and I just saw it from Michael Hintz's, check Michael Hintz's account, HINTZ. That's that was maybe I misread the tweet, but I saw that this morning. So I guess the other development that we've had, because Chia seems to have a lot going on right now, is also the Chip 21 development. I listened in on Monkey Zoo and Greg and Clyde Wallace's Zoom call with that, and it looks like they have the Chip 21 standard up and the ability to merge the different layers on any NFTs. And I know they're they're building their website and are going to have that up sometime in November. So all sorts of things going on in Chia. Rusty, you're going to have to move those.
I was searching on Matthew's thing. I'm not finding what you saw. I don't think the plot format is coming out soon. Maybe somebody in the audience or the community will correct us on that, but I think the timeline is still intact. There were things that needed to be done there. I know there's been some joke tweets going around about I support the new plot format and kind of these chain letters of I support the person who supports the person who supports whatever is kind of funny, but I don't think there's been new developments there with respect to coming out. There's still work that they're doing in math that's mathening, and I think the timeline's unlikely to be accelerated other than what Bram already told us.
Okay, well, I was surprised, but I guess I misread a tweet. Read a lot this morning, so get the math to math and all of that to go. Any other developments that are on your radar with regards to Chia?
Nope, I think that's kind of the rundown as far as things that I've seen recently, and wanted to recap all this stuff. I think the critical takeaway on this was it may not have been obvious that it was mostly about the voluntary carbon market. If that clarifies for anybody, there, I hope it did, because it was definitely something that I didn't understand when I first saw all that carbon retirement happening. I wasn't sure if this meant that the Paris Accord was kicking in, and then we were going to see like major movements. And as I had a chance to dig into it more, it was like, well, this is about the voluntary market at this point. So hopefully we see the further development of carbon stuff and real world asset trading. I think this paves the way for a lot of stuff that people have wanted to do. And it's always important to get that first use case completely across the finish line. We've been hearing about carbon trading on Chia for a long time, ever since it had its first code names and whatever. So to see it finally work this way, now I guess the next step is just to see the actual governments, large organizations, businesses, what have you, who are participating in the carbon economy and wanting to have those ESG designations, or because they're mandated to do these things through their voluntary actions, to see that start to kick in an accord. And maybe that will start to drive the speculation in the carbon market. Who knows?
I think it will. I think it will be a sounder economic system, and that's part of why I'm excited to see the voluntary aspect of it opening up first. And
what we need is a pump.fund for making carbon projects, right? Like how can you make your own carbon project and get some carbon credits? That'll be the next thing to do. Watch, I just called it pump.fund for carbon projects, not for creating the tokens themselves, because you have to have a project that backs it. But I guess if you can go outside and plant a garden, maybe you can get 5 carbon tokens because you planted a garden or something.
If Pump.Fum holds hands with Polymarket and comes over to Chia, I will play Red Rover with them. We'll see it. We'll see it happen at some point. Maybe it won't be them who does it.
Carbon.fund, maybe. Who knows?
Carbon.fund. Carbon.fund. I don't know about that. We'll see.
All right. Well, it's been fun recapping what's going on Chia. Had a good time, and we'll catch you next week.
Yep. All right. See you next week.